So, hello everyone, welcome. This is Aura Vasquez, and I couldn't be more honored today to be wearing the Equity LA Dodgers t-shirt. So much love for all those players and for bringing home a World Series championship. Welcome everyone. We have a very exciting conversation today. We're going to be talking about misconceptions about voting. And I couldn't have a better partner today to discuss this than Diana, who is the host and also an activist for parenting and politics. So, hello, welcome. How are
Hi, how are
you?
you? Hi everyone.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, hi everyone. And I would like to welcome everyone. And also, if you have any questions, comments, and suggestions, please post them on the comments and let us know what you guys, what you guys think. So, first question that I have for you is, how did you get involved in this work? How did you get to be political, and why do you care so much about voting?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be with you to talk about this super important topic, 6 days until election day. But I know we're going to talk about this earlier, but it's like election season, right? It feels like the longest season ever of an election cycle.
That's right.
So I got involved. So I've always been involved in kind of humanitarian causes since I was little. I was very aware that there was a lot of need. But I think now that I'm an adult, I've realized that I think it comes from my dad. He was like a union worker in his 20s, I want to say, back in Ecuador. And now he's 74 and he's still like a shop steward. And the other day he said to me, I posted about this on Instagram. He said to me, it was his day off. And I was like, where are you going? And he said, I'm going to phone bank. So I thought that was awesome. And I was like, okay, this is where I get it. And then I really became involved when I became a mom, when I was pregnant. And I realized that, working moms and pregnant people, there's so much that we need. And then, of course, when you have a baby, you realize that there's all these things that you need and that you want to make better for yourself and for other families. So kind of, I think, really maternity was my way really into this work as work.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's so interesting how much our parents and our family life and our environment influence what we do. I similarly, like you, I also was first politicized by my parents. They used to take me to all sorts of town hall meetings and community meetings. And I was always that child that spoke in all the meetings. I was always very encouraged by also my dad to speak my mind and to share my thoughts about what they were discussing. So from a very young age, I was encouraged and I was told that my voice really matters. So more kudos to your dad and to all of the parents out there that are watching. Thank you. Bring your kids to protest. Teach them about voting. Get them excited about civic engagement because it's so important. So I want to start maybe by asking you that question. Why is it so important for us to vote?
So it's really important for us to vote because, and this is why I created my podcast. I think a lot of times we don't realize that everything, as a parent, but really so many people in politics and lawmakers, they have such a big impact on our lives. Mm-hmm. And right now we're at a critical election. You've probably heard this before. This is kind of like I call it like a fork in the road. And we really need to get on the right road. And I think it's really important for everyone to go out and vote so that there is no kind of, so that we know where we want to go and there's no like, we don't know who's going to win. I really want people to vote their conscience. There's so much at stake, immigrant rights, women's rights, healthcare. Everything is on the line, really. And there's so many people who can't vote. So what I've been talking a lot about is we must vote if we can for those who cannot vote, right? And that can be anyone. We always think people who can vote, undocumented people, yes. The people who pick our food, the people who take care of our kids many times,
Essential
the people
workers.
Yes, a lot of essential workers are also, undocumented, but not even only undocumented, but also, we have members in our families who might just have a green card. Those people cannot vote. My husband is
That's true.
an example. He is an immigrant to this country. He has a green card. He cannot vote. He pays taxes, but he has no say. So if you can vote, it's really your responsibility to vote for the kind of country you want to see. And right now, like I said, we're at a critical point where we need to say, we need to use our voices. It's
Absolutely.
not a time to sit on the sidelines at all. And if you already voted, then you text your abuela, primo, cousin, tío, everybody and say, hey, did you vote? Hey, do you need information? Hey, do you need a ride? If you have friends who have kids, hey, do you need me to watch your kids so you can go vote? It's really all hands on deck at this moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to have this conversation with you because I hear friends often with so many misconceptions about voting, and people that I love, people that I know are educated, people that I know that are involved and that watch the news, maybe too much actually about the news, and maybe part of the misconceptions about voting are really come about from all of this misinformation that we're getting from all places. We hear it from our peers in social media. We see news, we see fake news. We're in an era where we don't really know what to believe. So I want to start with this point about the misconceptions about voting. So, can I only vote on election day?
Depending where you live, no.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to start with that caveat, which is very important. So just for context, I live in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
Auda, you're in California.
I'm in Los Angeles, yes.
Okay, so let's just talk about, so I think a lot of our conversation is going to be grounded on this, where we are.
Where we are at, yeah, of course.
So for example, in New York, this is the first year where we can early vote.
Yeah.
So we started early voting October 24th, which was Saturday, and we will continue to be able to vote early until November 1st. And then there's a day off, then November 3rd, the polls are open again. So depending on where you live, it will depend, number one, if you can early vote. Number two, if you can, how long. So if you go to, I'm going to just say one website, vote.org, there's a place where it'll list the state and it'll tell you what, the dates are, whether or not you can. So I did a little research, and for example, Alabama, you cannot early vote. Mississippi, you cannot vote early. Connecticut, you cannot. Delaware, you cannot. California, you can. Is that right?
Yeah, we can. Okay. We can make, and actually, you can if you have your ballot, you can mail it right now, or you can send it. As long as you can send it, you can mail it. Let's say you're like, I forgot, and I'm just gonna mail it the day off, and on Tuesday, on Super Tuesday, you can mail it that day, and it will still count, even if they get it 2 weeks after, because it's postmated. So that's another point that I want you to touch on.
So the first thing I want to say is there's a misconception that there's a lot of voter fraud when you mail in your ballots. That is also not true. There's no data that proves that point is true, that there's like massive voter fraud. That is something that they want to make you believe, so you don't vote by mail.
Exactly.
There's some states that have all mail-in votes. So for example, Hawaii this year, all mail-in voting, right? So
only
Colorado also has mail-in voting, and you can also drop off your ballot at specific sites. But what I wanna go back a little to what you said about the voting by mail. That's also something that it's by state. It depends on, like, certain states will say it has to be postmarked by November 3rd. Certain states will say we have to receive it by November 3rd.
Right.
There's also different rules according to what state you are. So that's why it's really important for you to find out what the rules are in your state at this point. And this is my personal recommendation. I would say that if this point you have your mail-in ballot and you haven't mailed it in yet, find out if you can drop it off at a polling site in your state. just because there's so much going on, there's so many different rules, and you really want your ballot to be counted. They just announced, for example, in Wisconsin, that if they receive it after November 3rd, they're not going to count the ballot. But in Pennsylvania, there's different rules. So that's why I'm saying it's all very confusing.
And
So
one place that you can find out what the rule that applies to you. So for folks in California that are listening, that I have a lot of folks in obviously here that follow me. For my audience in California, you can still mail it today. You can still mail it on the 3rd. As long as it's postmarked in California, that you got it till the day of election, you're good. So I just want to make sure that people know that, because I even got a phone call, a text message earlier before this talk with people saying, I'm worried that UPS is going to steal my mail and I'm not going to, what if it's too late? And I'm like, do you understand postmark? If it's postmarked on the 3rd, you'll be cool. If you are like mailing overnight tonight, you will be okay. So I just want to make sure that people know that in California. But where can people go to check what kind of rules applies to them in case that my non-California folks are watching?
So just very simple, easy to remember. Vote.org is like the easiest thing to remember, right?
Absolutely.
And Google is your friend. So just if you have a question, Google it and you'll get an answer probably.
Guys, vote.org. We can do this. Yeah. Vote.org. It's super simple. Okay, I wanna invite folks that are watching us, in my social media to please make comments, ask questions. Have you been that person that thought that you needed to only vote in person, or even? I love the statistics that you show about voting by mail or absentee ballot, because so many people have the idea that if they don't go in person, another very close friend of mine told me this, that if she herself doesn't go in person to the poll, that her vote's not going to be counted. And it's such a misconception about that.
Yeah, there is a lot of misconception. There's a lot of misinformation out there. Unfortunately, we live in a world right now with social media, with anything, anybody can publish anything on the internet. So depending on where you're getting your information, you are going to be getting some information that is incorrect. That's why it's super important to make sure that you're following trusted resources. Vote.org is an example where you're going to get the right information. And also be just very, very careful with what you're seeing on Facebook, because of the algorithm. Once you share or see one thing that is not 100% accurate, or that is a conspiracy theory, you're going to get bombarded with more of that. So that is something
they get you in that algorithm. If you like one thing, if you spend more than 3 seconds, guys, 1, 2, 3 seconds looking at something, you are part of that algorithm that now certainly you are in the conspiracy theories, or you are in you're just like in a whole other thing. So I agree with you 100% about, the power of social media and the power that the things that we like, we share, and we, and we just watch, it's interesting because I just became an aunt, just to give this as an example. And I posted a baby picture of my best nephew in the whole world, the best nephew on earth, Manny, Emmanuel. And certainly all of my feed became about babies. And even my stories, like when you go on that rabbit hole about watching other people's stories or stuff like that, it just all became about kids and babies. And I was like, why is this happening? Manny brought me all the babies. But moving on, I think I have a question here on Instagram. And if you want to ask questions, there is also a question mark next to the comment box where you can write your question, so we don't have to lose it. So she's curious to know if there is any difference of voting by mail or in person, which is one of our other myths. So are we just dropping off our mail in ballot and maybe getting a sticker? So what's your sense between voting in person and voting by mail? We had this as perfect segue.
So be very careful where you put your ballot. Just make sure it's an official ballot box. I
Mhm.
think you guys had problems in California with this, where there were
Yes.
like unofficial ballot boxes, and we
The
don't know where those
Republican
ballots
Party
are
was
going.
putting boxes out there to collect people's
Yes.
ballots.
So be very careful. Again, so there are websites where you can go to find out where the official ballot boxes are in your state. There are certain states where, like I said, if you have your mail-in ballot, you can drop it off at a polling state. So if there's in-person early voting, you can bring your ballot there, and you'll get a sticker there if you drop it off there. If you drop it off at a ballot box, I'm not sure there's a way for you to get a sticker. But in terms of asking, does my vote count equally if you are putting it in the ballot box, like a mail-in, or if you are voting in person, yes, your vote is your vote.
So, and I think to this
It's not like
question,
one way is more than the other.
yeah, so your vote is your vote, but I think this question is also about making it easier for yourself. So get on the plan, or get accustomed to vote early. So that's the beauty about voting by mail. You get your ballot, you fill it out, you send it. You don't have to wait. You don't have to take off work. You don't have to wake up, because sadly, in this country, we still don't have a day off when we need to vote. You still need to go on. And so in March 3rd for the primaries, I waited 1 hour to vote. I have friends that waited 3 hours to vote in California, in Los Angeles. So if I had sent my mail ballot or my absentee ballot, I wouldn't have had to stand in line for an hour and hope for the best. I would have just sent it and track it. So
that's also very important. You can track your ballot. In some states, I don't quote on the fact that you can track it everywhere, but I believe in many states you can track it. And I apologize if I keep saying I believe or don't quote me, and double check. But remember, we're dealing with a system that is not a national system. And I think part of the reason is to confuse us, and it's a tactic of voter suppression. You have 50 states. So 50 states have 50 different systems, 50 different deadlines. And then you have DC and Puerto Rico. So if you want to include those, you have 52. And I'm not even going to talk about like the overseas, Guam and Mariana Islands and everything.
Right.
The point is, there's not a uniform system. That's why it's super important to get informed. Don't be afraid to ask questions. You probably have a member of your family that is like the little activist, and, text that person and call that person and be like, what do I do?
Or just simply go to vote.org and find out, go and find out more. And, people ask for the sticker, and it's so great when I love going to vote, because I just love like the ritual part of it. Like I go there, I sign my name, I pick who I want or what I want to support. I get my sticker and I leave with a happy face. But sadly, as you were sharing about voter suppression, part of not having a holiday, a national holiday, as a voting day national holiday, is part of voter suppression, because it's not making it easier for you. So if you have a job where there's a job that is not flexible, where you can't just take off and say, well, I'm gonna go vote, but you have to work, then you have to wake up extra early or get off of work earlier. If your polling place is far from you, like in a lot of places in in rural America, you're talking about going to vote miles and miles away from your home or from your work. So this is when mail ballot becomes so important, or absentee ballots become so important, because it just makes it easier for you. But and I say but we had got so many messages about mail ballots being the spooky new boogeyman that is not good for us, and somebody's out there waiting for my ballot to steal it. And it's not really like that. And in California, for example, we have something called ballot, I want to say ballot tax, but I think I'm not pronouncing this correctly, which you can just track your ballot. They send you a text saying, we just got your ballot, we registered your ballot, we did this with your ballot, it's all good. So yeah, super important that you're informed. So really, really great question. Well, I wanna move us forward because I wanna talk about presidential elections. So this is the race. This is the election of our lives. Some people are calling it that. I personally can say that I really looking forward for a change in leadership. And is it only important to vote when we have presidential elections? Because I also have a lot of friends that don't vote or don't vote at the same rate because they're like, oh well, next year who's running for president? Like nobody. So tell us a little bit about elections and presidential elections. Like, is that the only thing that we should vote for?
No. Every election is important. Every election is important, and I'm going to explain why.
Mm-hmm.
Because, first of all, we have 3 branches of government. One branch of government has a lot of power, as you have just seen with what happened with the Supreme Court. Senators confirm Supreme Court justices.
Mm-hmm.
So whoever you are voting for, your elected officials have a lot of responsibilities for everything in our lives, right?
Yep.
That's at the federal level. So yes, it's important to vote, to know who your representatives in the House are. It's important to know who your senators are. Like I just shared that example. That's just one example.
It's important to know who your city council is.
Yeah, I'm getting there. So yes, so that's at the federal level. So that's important. Next, the state level. A lot of decisions about education, about transportation, about funding happen at the state level. It's important to vote for your governor, for your state assembly people, for your state senators. Know who they are. Vote for them, or vote against the people you don't want to see in office, who don't support the things that you support.
Mm-hmm.
And now, the lower level, which is local, like you said, city councilmen,
right.
In some places, school board. I live in New York City where we don't vote for school board. But school board is also important. As a parent, if you're wondering about curriculum, so about class sizes, about police officers in school, I want to give a plug because right now it's October is Juvenile Justice Month. And we had a podcast episode where we were talking about school budgets and the importance that school budgets and school boards have in making those decisions about, the budgets and what gets allocated to what, and why are we funding police officers but we're not funding counselors, for example, in schools. Mm-hmm. All those decisions are made at a local level.
Yep.
So I'm going to speak as parents, but in general, so many decisions about so many things in your everyday lives. Something like, for example, let's say you don't have kids. Let's say you have a dog.
The trees that we plant in our city, how we fix our sidewalks, how much public transportation we have, if we have any bike lanes. Climate change is treated, and it can be mitigated starting at the local level.
Yeah. So for example, like I said, I always talk about the parenting aspect of it, but let's say you don't have a kid. Let's say you have a dog, and that's perfectly fine. Not everybody wants to have kids. Good for you if you decide that you don't want to. If you have a dog and you see that you don't have a dog park in your area, or that your dog park is crappy and that you want to make it better, there are people in office that have funds to allocate to different projects, and you can get together with a group of community-minded citizens in your area and call your city council person and say, hey, we need a dog park, we need bike lanes, we need renewable energy to be more, what I mean? So
sustainable. We need reliable internet for students that are low income, that don't have internet to do their schoolwork.
That is an excellent example, especially now in COVID. The idea to me, Aura, that we are in a global pandemic where so many kids are learning remotely, and that people still do not have internet is it just blows my mind.
It's beyond me. And that all of this is why we need to vote down ballot. This is why we need to make sure that you don't only go out there and vote for president. I want to ask you a question, and this is a really good question, and we've been dealing with this in LA. I want to hear your opinion about this. That is tons. I mean, sadly, lots of our neighbors live on our streets. They don't have a place to call home. They are unsheltered. They're homeless. They're unhoused. Um, in LA, there is a way now for them to actually vote, but it's been really hard to kind of get people to vote, get people that don't have an address, because when you register to vote, you got to present out so you are in the right district or so. Do you see, is there any news on your end that to make sure that this is happening in LA? Unsheltered people can vote on Tuesday. They just have to say more or less where they usually are, so that they can vote. But are there any of these changes also happening in New York?
So New York has a huge homelessness problem.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually really worried about what is going to happen now that the winter is coming, and what is the situation going to be in shelters that are already crowded.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
have not heard any initiatives about voting, what the voting situation looks like for homeless people. I will say that during the census time, there was an effort to really have homeless people be able to fill out the census. And like you said, they would write, I guess where they normally would be, like if they were in Central Park or, by a church, or, kind of give their location.
Yeah.
I have not heard any voting initiatives in New York City, unfortunately, but I will say that homelessness is a big problem. And with COVID, I don't know what the shelter situation is going to look like, unfortunately.
We do have that.
Something else that is a bigger conversation, that in the richest country in the world, everybody should be sheltered. But that's another episode for us to talk about.
We need to get on another live stream about that. Exactly. Well, when I ran for office just recently, as part of my policy platform was to allow undocumented folks to vote for a school board, for local elections, because they contribute to our community, they pay taxes, but they have no representation. Sounds familiar? Taxation without representation. So I think it's time for also to find an avenue. I mean, obviously, I didn't get to where I wanted to be, but it's important for us to continue uplifting these issues, because there's a lot of people in this country that contribute and they don't have a voice. So that's why you also need to vote, and you need to make sure that you're voting out there, so that other people that can do it have a voice through your voice. So that's important. I wanted to ask you about.
Aura,
Go ahead.
I want you to share something. When we were prepping for this, you said it was really cool that in California, the ballot is flipped. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I think that's great. I think we should do that everywhere.
That is so interesting, because you and I were preparing for this live stream, and you were like, oh yeah, we need to just insist that people need to go all the way down the ballot. And I started thinking, and I was like, why? Oh, because the local races are at the end. And I said, no, in California, we flip that. People first vote locally. They look for their local stuff, and then they vote for the flashy things, presidential elections and, Senate, or the federal. So first starts local, then I believe is the measures that are usually more statewide, and then you vote for president. So that's what's happening here. So that does not happen in New York.
No, I haven't voted this cycle yet, but I don't think that it has been flipped now.
Okay.
So usually what happens also that down the ballot, like for example, you'll know if there's a presidential race, and then let's say there's a senator, you'll know, right? And maybe you'll know your city council. But a lot of times, if you keep going, there are judges and they're district leaders and there are all these things. And if you go in person and you're not prepared, you haven't researched, you don't know what these positions are, you don't know who the people are running. So a lot of time people either leave them blank, or a lot of people will say, well, I'm a Democrat, so I'm just going to vote all the way down Democrat, or I'm a Republican, so I'm going to go vote all the way, down. Right. So I think that if you also have requested your mail-in ballot and you look at it, you also have a time to kind of research the people, ask questions, I know there are lists about, like who are the progressive candidates for XYZ. There's a lot of information out there. So yeah, it's important to kind of look for that information so you can vote aligned with your values, really.
I'm not sure. So I see Taina, you're making a comment, but I'm not sure what you mean about the questions. You're saying it would be great to also have the questions on top. What do you mean? What questions? So many voters forget to answer this. Okay, so while you get back to us, I want to talk about something that's super important, because again, in this fear world that we find ourselves today, what if we see something weird happen, like an anomaly, like something that, like for example, in Orange County and in some places in California where they just found some random box, mail boxes, and people were dropping off their ballots, and that was not an official, dropping place. So where can we report anomalies or things that are not right in terms of voting? Who do we call? Like, or if I get a ballot and it has like, or where do I go if I get a ballot that has the wrong information? How do I deal with that?
So the wrong information, like on your ballot specifically?
Yeah, also like any anomaly or any problems or anything that I see that is shady, or if I just went to drop off my mail ballot and I saw somebody putting their hand in there and grabbing, I don't know. I mean, we're in a crazy world. Or if I just was walking on the street and I saw a truck picking the whole mailbox thing and taking it with them, like, what do I do? Who do I turn to?
I'm laughing, but it actually, these are things that actually have, I think, that can happen. So there's a phone number. It's 866-OUR-VOTE.
Okay, hold on. I'm going to put that in a banner so everybody can. Okay. So it's 866
OUR-VOTE.
Our vote.
Yes.
Okay,
and they're
amazing.
Usually, if you're at a polling place, there will be, workers that you can reach out to, if you see someone online doing something inappropriate, or electioneering is also not allowed. So when you're online and you're going to go vote, don't wear your like Biden-Harris t-shirt and you're like vote Biden mask.
In California, you can't do that. In California,
you cannot
show up with
you cannot do
out
that,
of 2020 or anything like that. Yeah.
So you can have something that says vote, but you cannot have something that says vote for a specific candidate.
Awesome. Okay. So we get that. And if we see somebody carrying one of the official mailboxes, they just stop in a truck and took him, call the police. Don't let them get away with it. I mean, I hope that never happens, but you never know. So yeah, I want to return to one of the questions from Taina in the audience, where she's basically asking, why don't they have the measures and the local stuff at the beginning? That's something that varies. Like I said, in California, we just changed the law. So all of the local stuff, so city council members, the school board, then the local measures, then the state stuff come in, and then national. So we actually flip the whole thing. So the first is our local stuff. So this is something that you can call your wait, hold on. Is the office of in California is Padilla.
Yeah, they're different. So like you said, depending on, what organism in your city and in your state, like in New York City, we have the Board of Elections. Unfortunately, I think they're a little confused right now. I requested to be a poll worker, and I got back an assignment to be a Chinese interpreter. And I was like, I'm so sorry. I would love to help you, but I'm not qualified for this position. So I think that depending on where you are, things are a little in flux right now, especially because of COVID. And I think people, a lot of offices are understaffed, but there are nonprofits that are working to, have voter laws change. There was a lot of work done around, for example, early voting in New York. Like I mentioned earlier, it's the first year that we can do it, which is amazing because the turnout has been increasing since Saturday. I think was in the 90 something thousand. It has been steadily increasing despite the fact that we've had rain here. So, but it's great because, as you mentioned earlier, not everyone can go on Tuesday. If they work, they can't take time off work. Some places, though, I will say, some workplaces give you time off to work. So check with your employers. Sorry, I lost my train of thought, but go ahead. No, absolutely. Yeah. We in New York, we should also have automatic registration, right? Like someone turns 18 and you're automatically registered to vote. You shouldn't have to go through hoops. You miss the deadline. Like you should be able to vote. You should get a registration when you are 18, and you should have same day registration, right? Like if you're not registered, but you became a citizen and you want to be able to go vote, you should be able to do that as well. But again, these are all voter suppression tactics. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of the great things, a lot of movements are kind of pushed by young people. For example, like if you think about DACA, right? Why did DACA become a reality? Because it was youth leaders, it was the dreamers who kind of pushed the Obama administration to do something, right? You were talking about gun reform. The Parkland, Emma Gonzalez, and David Hogg, I believe is his name.
Yep.
They've also been very vocal Yeah, and the youth, they are leaders, they are fearless. Remember, I mean, I am almost 40, but when you are 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, you are not afraid, right? You want to go, and you have the perfect amount of like chutzpah and the perfect amount of like energy. It's like all perfect. You're not afraid. And you're a little bit rebellious, which this is a country that was born
It's
out of
necessary.
rebellion, right?
I feel like it's necessary. I mean, this is like one of the most exciting for me years. And also, there's a lot of physiological things that happen. Your brain is not all fully developed, which is where I have a real where for me, like treating young people as adults when they commit crimes is just terrible. Personally, I feel like we don't treat our youth, as what they are, and we have criminalized them for things that are beyond even their own power. But back to voting, back to our conversation about voting. I wanted to also we talked a little bit about this earlier, and when you and I were preparing for this live stream, I talked about it as being the other side of the coin. So we hear people say, oh, people don't vote, they don't care, they don't do it, I don't know why. And the other side of that coin is voter suppression, and how this is happening right now. And for some of you, you're like, well, I got my absentee ballot, or I didn't get it, or, and there's so many forms in which our political process has been trying to not allow minorities, people of color, women, to not exercise the right to vote. So I wanna talk a little bit about that with you, and what are some of the other ways that we kind of see like, oh yeah, it's this difficult, but it's actually like another form of voter suppression. Like, for example, that your mail ballot, your signature needs to be perfectly fitting in some places. Like, it needs to be a perfect match in order for them to accept your vote. So what are some other ways that we think that is kind of innocent but it's really not?
Like voter suppression
Yep.
tactics.
In terms of yeah.
ID laws. Depending
Mm-hmm.
again, depending where you are, you must show ID in order to vote. In the United States, some rule. Maybe if you live in a rural community where it's hard for you to go to the DMV and get an ID, maybe an ID is, $55, and you live on minimum wage, and you can't really spend $55 on an ID, right? Those are some
Those are
examples
other
of.
ways. Yeah. Oh, another one is like what I was saying, that they make it super difficult for, if you're in rural America and you have to drive 30 miles to cast your vote, and the only way that you can do it is in person. I mean, that's pretty difficult. And we're talking about gas money. We're talking about having a car. I mean, we're talking about a lot of steps that make, voting really difficult. So, okay. So some last thoughts about, misconceptions about voting that we haven't covered yet. Anything that you can think of? We talked about presidential issues only matter. We talked about
Yes.
only voting. Yeah, go for it.
Okay. We often talk about, like all the pundits on television, right now, they have the map out, and they have the blue states, and they have the light blue states, which are leaning Democrat, and they have the red states, which are hardcore Republican, and then they have the light red states, which are leaning Republican, and then they have the toss-up states. So and there's a lot of emphasis placed on specific states, right? The battleground states, the swing states.
Mm-hmm.
And what we want to say in this election is, do not take your vote for granted wherever you are. I think the goal is to have a change in the person who's current in the White House, and in the people in the Senate, especially who have been enablers and aiding and abetting what has been happening.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter what state you are in. We need everybody to vote. I don't care if you live in New York and it's a solidly Democratic state. You know, we're talking about Texas being possibly going Democrat this year. Like,
I know.
everybody needs to vote. So if you voted, please, 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 after you listen to this, you already voted, text your madrina, text your primo. I'm telling you,
Check
text
in with
them
your
even if you think
neighbor.
they're not politically, you know, even if you think they're not politically engaged, text them. If you cannot vote, text someone you love that you know can vote and say to them, I can't vote, but please, you can vote. Vote for me. You know, vote for my kids. Vote for my undocumented spouse. You know, there's so much at stake, and I don't want us to get caught up in the maps. I don't want us to get caught in this like battleground. I don't need to go vote because it doesn't matter
I
in New
live
York.
in California, and California is gonna be blue, so my vote doesn't really matter. I don't want to hear none of that this year,
Yeah.
y'all. I was
The
just
goal,
yeah.
the goal. So you probably have noticed if you follow me already, I'm a Biden supporter. But the goal is really to have so many people out to vote that there's no room for like questioning. That is what we want.
Exactly, guys,
It's
because
so
this is
clear that what the American people that have voted want, that it's so clear that we are tired of someone in office saying, you know, that Mexicans are rapists and that
COVID
immigrants
doesn't exist. It's the Chinese flu.
Yeah,
Even though him
absolutely.
himself had it, you know.
If you are ready for that change, you have to go vote. You have to do what you can. You have to join a virtual phone bank if you can. You know, do what you can because, and someone else said this, I'm not the first person to say it, but you don't want to wake up on the 4th or the 5th or the 6th, which by the way, don't expect results right away. But you don't want to wake up and be like, oh, I didn't vote, crap. Because even if you think it's only your vote, there are thousands of other people who are also thinking, oh, it's only my vote. It's not going to matter. So you say that, and 20,000 other people say that, and guess what? We have 20,000 people who didn't vote. And I think in the last election, I can't remember if it was Pennsylvania or Wisconsin or Michigan, but one of those three, it was 10,000 votes that made the difference.
I mean,
that's
guys,
going
the
to the person it went to.
Let me remind you all about a race very dear to my heart, which was Al Gore and Bush. I hate to bring you back to those memories, but we cannot end up there this year because I worry personally that I have heard a president that have said, I'm not going to go down easily. I'm going to resist, where he has indicated to white supremacist groups to stand by. So, like, guys, we cannot end up in another Florida situation where there are people. Yeah, I mean, this can be deadly for a lot of folks out there. I mean, this is the state of our political environment right now. So, yes, vote. It doesn't matter that you're in California or you're in New York. That is blue. That is green. That is go and vote. Go and vote.
There's also a lot of misconception, and I feel like we need to just mention this.
Mm-hmm.
The Democrats are not socialists. Like, I know there are a lot of ads out there that are saying that the Democrats are socialists and that they're being targeted to very specific demographics in the Hispanic community. A lot of older adults are being targeted with these ads. Nancy Pelosi is not going to come to like take your stuff away. She's not like this awful socialist who's going to take all your things. That is not true, number one. Number two, there is someone in office right now who has, as Aura mentioned, said that they might contest, that they might resist leaving if they don't, if they don't get their way. They have not condemned white supremacist groups who have tried to literally kidnap a sitting governor, right? So these are not normal times. These are not normal things. You know, this is not the Republican Party of John McCain, may he rest in peace. Or even, I'm going to say, I cannot believe I'm going to say this, but even of like a George W. Bush, which I know there's so much, it's just, you know, someone said, I interviewed someone, she said, you know, back in the day, Democrats and Republicans kind of had the same, they had the same values, they just had different ways of looking at things, right? Right. So they were good people, but they had different way of looking at things, different economic policies, different, but you could agree that they were good people. We are at a point where we cannot agree that what is happening is good or normal. When you have someone in office that is saying that it's okay that he's going to grab women by the expletive, right? It's not normal. No matter how much we try to normalize it, it's not normal, right? So remember that
I want to reflect on some comments here. I'm not thinking now that, or I'm not, what we're trying to say is that we had a two-way party for a really long time. It's not of my liking. It's not what I decide. It's not what I like. It's not what I want, but this is where we're at. And there was a period in history where there was a lot more centric politicking, you know, where both parties will come together and, you know, and try to pass policy and do other things. You know, I feel that not all Republicans are the same. I personally believe that they do have a baseline ideology, just like the Democrats. And I don't also think that the Democrats are so great either. I'm not insinuating that. But I do think that if we're looking historically, we had other periods where Republicans were not shouting, grab her by the pussy, or all Mexicans are rapists and criminals. So maybe people think that, and maybe that's what they were basing their maybe their policies. But that I think that what we're trying to point to is that we have a moment in history where we have the commander-in-chief normalizing that kind of attitude and that kind of language and that kind of behavior. So I think that that's the difference here. I'm not saying that they're better or worse, or the Bush was my dude. I'm not saying any of that, or I'm not insinuating that. I just think that we have somebody in power, an influencer, somebody that is the highest ranking man in power in our country, normalizing
the world. Because let me tell you, the world is watching what is happening. The world is watching, and they don't understand what the hell is happening here. Right. And exactly. As you were speaking, I was looking at the comments, and I see what you were referring to. And I'm going to just give you an example. And like I said, I don't agree with John McCain, and, you know, it is, may he rest in peace. But I will say that when you can look up the clip where he was up for president against Obama, and someone came on the mic, took the microphone and said, you know, Obama's a Muslim, yada, yada, yada. And he said, no, he's not. We differ on policy. And, you know, I don't agree with him, but he is not. And that is what we are talking about, right? And what we are seeing now in the Republican Party, in the Senate specifically, is people who are just bowing down. People who before said that the person in the White House was like the worst possible thing that could happen to the United States have aligned with him and have given him the power to put 3 justices in office that are just, there's nothing that this person can do. They're just not, like, there's no pushback. It's supposed to be checks and balances. There is no checks and balances because
not right now, because they're dominating everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
So and that's what I'm referring to, right?
Yeah,
and there have been Republicans who are not in the Senate who have spoken out against this fake Republican that unfortunately is sitting in the White House right now.
Right, exactly. And you know, we're talking about the misconceptions about voting, and we just kind of zoom in a little bit on, you know, I mean, as much as we want to make this election even voting, bipartisan, which we encourage everyone to vote, it's pretty clear that for people at least like me, need to really think about what we're doing and why I was a big Bernie Sanders supporter. I have been a big but Bernie Sanders is not on the ticket, guys. Get over it. Bernie is not running for president right now. We cannot vote for him right now. So, we have a president that is not, I mean, we clearly just stated a few things about him. So we'll leave you with that. Vote wisely and vote and vote for the other people that can vote. I see folks.
Someone said if you don't vote, you don't have the right to complain.
That is a really good point. You have to exercise your right. I'm not gonna go discussing, at this point of the game, we're a week before the elections. This is not a conversation about a third or fourth or how many parties we need to have or the electoral college. It's all good. Third party people is dangerous, guys. You guys are walking a very fine line, and don't fuck it up like before. So I get you all racist out there and you're pissed, and I totally get it, and I am with you 100%. But I want to remind you again that we are choosing between someone that might be horrible and someone that has asked people to grab women by the pussy, that has stated that Mexicans are rapists and criminals, that are putting families in cages right now. That is going to be nearly impossible for us to move if that's the case. So for my third party folks out there, I love you a long time. Do what you, but please, especially on these swing states, we cannot afford that. And I'm not here to convince you either. I think it's important to vote. I think it's extremely important for folks to know that there are misconceptions that are unreal. I'm sad to see some friends that are really thinking that voting is not really what it really is. How can someone track their ballot if they want to vote? How can someone track their ballot if they want to?
Some states have systems, like you said, in California, there's a texting system that will tell you how your vote is. It depends on every state what kind of system they have in place for you to track your ballot. And I know we're wrapping up, but I want to just make one point about what you said about Mexican, the comment that this man in the White House made when he came down, I think, and announced what we thought was like a joke of a run for presidency, right? He said Mexicans are rapists. When he said Mexicans are rapists, he didn't specifically mean people born in Mexico are rapists. That was just code for immigrants / people of color / brown people. That's what he really meant, right? So I think I'm going to give you a couple of stats. Number one, Latinx community is 13.3% of all eligible voters.
Yeah, I can hear that.
13.3%. Make sure you vote. In swing states, battleground states, Arizona, they're 24% of the electorate. In Texas, they're 30% of the electorate. In New Mexico, they're almost half, 43%. In California, 30%. In Florida, 20%. All of those percentages should all be going to vote. So that is what I'm going to leave you with.
Awesome. It was so great having you here today. Thank you so much for stopping by.
Thank you so much, Aura.
And I'll share this live stream so people can go back. Please share it around and share it with your friends, and make sure that you check in with your neighbors, with your parents, with people in your family, with your exes, with whoever you think. Send that email and let them know that you are that you have already voted, and that you want to make sure that they have everything that they need to also exercise their right to vote.
And thank you, como buenos Latinos, after you vote,
A
throw a
bailar.
party, selfie.
That's right, a bailar. Thank you so much, Diana, and we talk very soon.
All right. To celebrate.
To celebrate. There you go. So hopefully next week we will have more information about how this race unfolded. It will be great to continue the conversation on social media. Please go ahead and continue with the comments and the questions, and we will try to answer them as we get them. I hope everybody has an amazing time, and we'll talk soon. And don't forget, just get out there and vote. We'll talk soon. Bye. Dude,